Je anilo premadano karma kacho.
Clear this area. So,
I do that to stand up before. I do the bottle, thing on the bottle, I just take the drum like that.
for which there are several pending lawsuits, actually. So, in 1969, I attended a lecture by Srila Prabhupada in Berkeley, California, at the university. And then I saw the devotees from time to time in the city of Berkeley and chanted with them and so on. And then during the summer of 1969, I went home from Berkeley to Los Angeles, and by Krishna's arrangement began to visit the Hare Krishna temple, which at that time was on La Cienega Boulevard. It's quite an extraordinary temple back then. Anyway, so that first temple that I visited in Berkeley was under the command of Tamal Krishna Goswami. In those days, the temple president was more or less like the president of India, I suppose. Not entirely a ceremonial post, but sort of deal with official matters and things like that. And in those days, the temple commander was really the temple commander of the temple. And the commander, of course, was Krishna Goswami. And so I used to sometimes joke with him, he was the first devotee to chastise me. Which is of course my great fortune. I had decided during that summer that I really had to join the Hare Krishna movement, that I could not authentically not join the Hare Krishna movement. And then I thought, well, I'd better not join in Los Angeles because all my family's down here, and when I thought of what would happen if I joined in LA, all I could see is this big mushroom cloud going up. It'd be like in other words, it would be so heavy, they would go, I just knew all hell would break loose. So, since I was still officially a student at Berkeley, and there was still a war in Vietnam, and I was not drafted for the war because I was a student, I thought I might as well go ahead and continue being a student. And so I thought, well, I'll just go back to Berkeley and I'll join the Hare Krishna temple there, because I knew that over that summer they'd opened a temple there. So Tamal Krishna Goswami was always what they call in car dealerships the closer. In the sense that, the various salesmen will try to sell a car, and then when the customer is interested but they can't quite sell it, they'll bring in the master salesman, and he'll close the deal. They call that person, the closer. And so Tamal Krishna was famous even back then for getting people to actually join the Hare Krishna movement. And so, he saw me, I'd become somewhat of a familiar face. He knew that I was coming somewhat regularly. And so one day he came and just sat down next to me. He said, I can't remember word for word, but he said something like, so you like Krishna Consciousness? I said, yes. Are you thinking of joining the Hare Krishna movement? Yeah, actually, I am thinking of joining. He said, so you're going to join here in Los Angeles, right? And I said, well, no, actually, I plan to go back to Berkeley and join there because of my family. So then he said, I remember he said, that's duality. And I thought, he's right, but it's a real heavy duality. Anyway, I remember that was, so I considered my great fortune, and he was right, it was duality, but somehow or other I went back to Berkeley and joined the Hare Krishna movement. And the next time I came back to the Los Angeles temple, it was to be initiated by Srila Prabhupada, I think in January of the next year, 1970. By that time, Srila Prabhupada... Actually, no, there's another story. Actually, there's another... The next time I saw Tamal Krishna Goswami was in Berkeley, perhaps toward the end of 1969. And it was a very impressive visit. Tamal Krishna Goswami, because he excelled in his devotional service, because he had such natural leadership qualities, and because he was just more determined and a lot more determined and intelligent than the people around him, he became the regional secretary for the West Coast practically before we even had regional secretaries. So there was a regional meeting for all the temple presidents of the West Coast, and the meeting took place in Berkeley, where I was a brahmachari. We didn't use the word bhakta then; it was just your legal name and Prabhu. So I was Howard Prabhu. Sometimes in those days, the devotees would even sign their names like John Prabhu. I don't know if Mahatma was there then for that regional meeting. But it was actually quite thrilling for me. All these older devotees came, and Tamal Krishna Goswami was the leader. And I remember him had this very distinct impression of an arti that took place there in the Berkeley Temple toward the end of 1969. And he was singing Bhaja Bhakata and dancing quite gracefully and vigorously with big steps, you know the way we dance. And so he was dancing. I remember I was very impressed. I was quite impressed that I could tell that he was a spiritual leader. So then actually this must have been in September of '69, really. It must have been late September '69, because at that time I didn't know whether I should stay in school or not. I was a student in Berkeley. I had a little scholarship there, and I didn't know whether it was bona fide or the right thing to do to stay in the university. So I asked the temple president, and he said, I don't know, ask Tamal Krishna, because he was the regional secretary. So I asked Tamal Krishna, and he said, this is quite significant, he said, I don't know, write a letter to Prabhupada. And this is very significant because the first time I wrote a letter to Prabhupada, it was under the order of Tamal Krishna. So I wrote that letter to Prabhupada, and he wrote back and said, yes, stay in the university. I want you to be nicely educated so that you can preach to similarly educated people. Now that was an instruction that eventually had something to do with Tamal Krishna Goswami, going back to college. But anyway, just parenthetically here, which means in parentheses, it's still dawning on me. I'm still learning how immature I was back then. Or we were. I don't want to blame everyone for it, but because I had the realization last night I was speaking in Atlanta, and I realized that because I eventually did drop out of school, I wasn't mature enough to carry out that order at that time, and I was just a little too zealous for the University of California, Berkeley. But because I did drop out of school, it caused so much trouble with my family, and they became very agitated, and then of course I took their agitation as a sure sign of their impiety. And it really just took, after decades, I realized that, well, wait a second. They were right. Because what they wanted me to do was what Prabhupada ordered me to do. I just wasn't able to do it then. And it just made me realize how much of the trouble we've had in this country is because of our own immaturity, which we always, of course, understand to be the spiritual maturity of other people. But there was an example in my own life where I simply wasn't able at that point to follow Prabhupada's order, and it caused some disturbance in my family. And then I always took it that the whole cause of the disturbance was them. When in fact, if I had been able to follow Prabhupada's instruction and act maturely, things would have been very different. But in any case, that instruction from Srila Prabhupada became sort of the instruction for my life. Just as Prabhupada once wrote a letter to his guru and said, "What should I do?" And he said, "If you can preach in English or people in the West and so on." And that became the theme of Prabhupada's life. So that letter I wrote to Prabhupada and the letter Prabhupada wrote back, which really gave direction to my life, that was by the, I think I should say by the mercy of Tamal Krishna Goswami. Because he told me to write to Srila Prabhupada. Come on in. Don't be shy. Mahatma's not drinking anymore. So in the meantime, then I of course stayed in Berkeley, and by the time I came back to Los Angeles to be initiated, Tamal Krishna Goswami, after really, I think we'd have to say really pioneering the whole concept of traveling Sankirtan in this country. I mean, during that period, before we followed him to Europe, the significance of really pioneering, being the first one to go out and just realize that you can get in a vehicle and drive around and harass people. I mean, I'm just joking. That we can actually get in vehicles and go around and preach and distribute books, which has been one of the most important programs in the history of this movement. And it really was pioneered by Tamal Krishna. I'm not saying Goswami because it would be anachronistic. He's not a Goswami, and I'm trying to kind of reliving all this. So I'm just saying Tamal Krishna. Anyway, it's really a monumental historical achievement to have done that, for which I'm sure historians for the next 10,000 years will give him a lot of credit. So he really pioneered the traveling Sankirtan, and he was instrumental in assisting Prabhupada in the founding of what has become the most important temple in North America, and a temple that was for many years the international headquarters in New Dwarka. And after that, of course, he was regional secretary for the Western Zone, which was the fastest growing zone in ISKCON. And having done all of those, there's some snapping out over there. That's all right. We won't apply corporal punishment this time. She'll have fun till the Swami takes her beans away. Anyway, what? Right. So, is there any hope that it's not going to snap? Okay. Anyway, so Tamal Krishna Goswami really made a mark on the Hare Krishna movement as a rookie. As a new devotee, he really performed outstanding service of historical importance, even as a young devotee. And then we know that famous story how Prabhupada sent two householder couples to London and they met the Beatles and all that stuff started happening. Of course, Krishna also gone to Hamburg, Germany, and Europe started to happen. And so, therefore, Prabhupada sent Tamal Krishna Goswami. I think it's significant that when Prabhupada was founding the important Los Angeles temple, and really when Shravana Sankirtan was starting, Tamal Krishna Goswami was there as Prabhupada's right-hand man. And when Europe started developing, it again, it was Tamal Krishna Goswami who was sent to organize it, to somehow put it all into a coherent structure. So these are very important services. The fact that Europe was organized early on and set on the right track administratively was, again, is of great historical importance. And then after that, Prabhupada went to India, and of course, Tamal Krishna Goswami not only went with Prabhupada to again pioneer his third continent. After a couple of years, I mean, he was basically organizing more continents than he had years in the movement. So when he went with Prabhupada to India, he naturally ended up as a GBC. I guess because Tamal Krishna Goswami and I had such a fun relationship, and because he was I was born in a family of three brothers, and I had one older brother, and he was someone I could really have fun with as an older brother. And we were close enough in age, both in the movement and in bodily age, so that it, I could be a little irreverent, but not over the line. But anyway, so, but it is very significant that he then went to another, he ended up, I know what I was going to say. I prefaced that so you wouldn't take it the wrong way, but when I was growing up, there was this group of people like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., all these entertainers that were called the Rat Pack. You may have heard of this, the Rat Pack. And in the Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra was always called the chairman of the board because he was always kind of like the head of the group. And so among our little Rat Pack, our little Goswami Rat Pack, there was a sense in which TKG was always the chairman of the board. He just had this natural leadership quality, and so therefore it's just the fact that he became the GBC in India is like a no-brainer. I mean, who else would you expect to end up as a GBC in India except Tamal Krishna? And so he did become the GBC. He was again Prabhupada's right-hand man. And then he did something which again changed my life. He gave me an instruction which changed my life and telling me to write to Prabhupada. And then he did something else which changed my life. And that is that he took sannyas. He was the first householder to take sannyas. And of course, at that time, I was a householder, and I began to suspect that it might not be the most natural ashram for me. Although I would have to say, an excellent wife, and but still, it's just, I guess everyone has their nature. And so when I remember I was a temple president, and we used to get all the news from Prabhupada. Shama Sundar, the secretary, used to write these stream of consciousness reports on Srila Prabhupada, and that was really our the most precious thing to us. We would get these. In those days, of course, there were no computers, and there were no faxes, and there were no telex machines, and so we would just get letters in the mail. One ironic thing, which I just, again, want to just add as a little footnote here, in an age of unprecedented communication where everyone has a computer and a modem and everyone is writing letters back and forth, there's actually less communication in ISKCON than ever before, which is ironic. And devotees, for example, in North America know less about what's going on in other temples in North America, much less than they did back then when we hop often didn't even have telephones and just wrote letters. Anyway, it's like just an irony which deserves a separate discussion and some socio-historical analysis. But so back to the point. When I heard this news that Tamal Krishna Goswami, or now Goswami, had taken sannyas, I was electrified. Because I never imagined that a married person could take sannyas, which, of course, once again, he can't. The way this kind is now. But anyway, so I was astonished by this news that Tamal Krishna had taken sannyas, and I began thinking. To make a long story short, then a few months later, I ended up taking sannyas. But so Tamal Krishna Goswami was always at Prabhupada's feet. He was always going in front. He was always a pioneer, always doing what other people didn't have either the courage or the intelligence or the imagination to do. And so again, he took sannyas, and this was another act of spiritual leadership, and it changed my life because it led me to take sannyas. And so Tamal Krishna was like, well, what year did he come back from India and formed Hrdayananda? I think it was around 74. He came back and, of course, joined the Traveling Roadshow, which he transformed into probably the most powerful book distribution party in the history of ISKCON, which was another outstanding contribution. In 1974, I was placed on the GBC by Srila Prabhupada, and then I began to really have more regular association with Tamal Krishna Goswami, because we were on the GBC together. So he created this, probably the most powerful traveling Sankirtan party in the history of ISKCON, and then one little funny incident that happened is that no one could beat Radha Damodar. They would always win, and you probably never noticed it yourself. It's quite subtle, but Tamal Krishna Goswami at times was a little competitive. And so, in the Radha Damodar days, he was very much a general, very much the commander-in-chief. And Prabhupada sent me down to Latin America in 1974, and I tried to focus on first printing books because we hardly had any books, and so we produced some books. And then by December of 1975, we were really sort of in gear, and it was a large zone, and we'd printed lots of books and organized Sankirtan parties. And as the marathon started, I remember the results started coming in. They were very big, and it looked like we were going to do more than Radha Damodar party. And I remember I was in our Sankirtan room in Mexico City, and I don't know if I called Tamal Krishna Goswami or he called me, but somehow we were on the phone together. I don't even remember how but we were on the phone together. I remember, I think the first week we actually won, Latin America won, and then he was, he gave me a stern lecture about how I should not even dream we were going to win the marathon. But anyway, as each week passed, Latin America kept doing more and more and more, and eventually won the marathon. And then in January, just right after the December marathons, January '76, Tamal Krishna Goswami and myself both happened to be in Los Angeles, and Prabhupada was there. So we went on a walk one morning in Santa Monica Park, and Prabhupada started sort of teasing Tamal Krishna Goswami, joking and saying, "So no one could defeat Radha Damodar, but now they have defeated Radha Damodar." Like he's sort of saying, like, "Are you going to take that?" Prabhupada was joking, so then he stopped and he smiled and he said, "I like this competition." So it was very nice, and of course Tamal Krishna and myself were both very happy. It was all very good natured, and Prabhupada said, "I like this competition." Anyway, then, of course, Tamal Krishna Goswami, Prabhupada sent him to China. That's famous. I mean, that's a world-famous dispatch. When Prabhupada sent Tamal Krishna Goswami to China, and I think it's fair to say that no one else could have opened China. Just as no one else really could have been GBC of India, or probably organized Europe, or created Traveling Sankirtan and ISKCON, or the Radha Damodar Party, and certainly I can't imagine that any of us besides him could have opened China. It was something that only he could do for Prabhupada. So he did it. He did it, and then sort of fast forwarding here, at that point, because, well, I'll tell one funny little thing for this lighter. You know, Tamal Krishna Goswami liked to wear those kurtas that had little ties on them. And we were just like brothers, and it's like, you know, just playing around. So I had a little obnoxious habit where when I saw him, I would always greet him very respectfully and then untie his. And I remember he would always react. He would laugh. He always react like a loving older brother. And so it's kind of a little, as we say in ISKCON, rasa we had together. I know Rameshwar used to, when we used to stay in the Mayapur building, when there really were no other buildings, and where Prabhupada's rooms are, and you know the screen doors are on both sides of the rooms, and you can lock them from the inside and the outside. And so he used to go and lock me into my room. Which I would retaliate when I finally got out. And it was easy to get out. Just ask some passing boy to let me out, and I'd go and throw a bucket of water on him. So we actually used to have a good time together. And perhaps I could say something that Tamal Krishna Goswami always used to say to me, and of course I'd say to him, about that period when we were in the GBC together. That is that, of course, we were on the GBC together for 3 years when Prabhupada was here. He was one of the original members of the GBC. I was on the GBC for 3 years with him, 3.5 years with Prabhupada. And then when Prabhupada passed away, it was an especially difficult period for everyone. It could hardly not be an especially difficult period when Prabhupada passed away. And there was a special bond that formed because for several years after Prabhupada passed away, really at least 7 or 8 years, there was a group of devotees on the GBC who shouldered a lot of responsibility whenever there was some serious issue, would be very heavily involved and really felt a special burden and responsibility just to keep Prabhupada's movement going and make sure it just didn't disappear. And somehow I was in that position, and of course, Tamal Krishna Goswami was naturally in that position. And so there was a special bond, which one thing he would always say to me, or we would always say to each other really, is that there was hardly anyone left in the world that can understand what we had been through and what it really was like. Especially in those days, those critical days of just making sure the movement survived. It's like the sort of special, unique bond that forms between men in wartime when they're in trenches together and so on, and go through so many battles. So because we went through so many battles that were not merely personal struggles, but actually struggles to defend and preserve the whole Hare Krishna movement. And so many times we were on the front, we were always in the front lines. Him and I were always in the front lines, and we were often in the front lines together. And so there was a special bond, and he would always say that to me, that no one else could understand, because everyone was gone practically. And that there was hardly anyone left who had really gone through that in exactly the same way. And as Tamal Krishna Goswami created so many large zones, somehow by Prabhupada's arrangement, he sent me to different places and also very large zones emerged. And so we had that special bond. That was probably, of course, he was very special to me because he was like one older brother I could really, quote unquote, kind of identify with or really relate to. And because of what we went through together, he always considered it very special. He always said to me, there's no one else left practically that really understands these things. So, anyway, then in 1995, I believe, he was sort of at a crossroads because he felt that he needed a new challenge. Prabhupada actually wrote me one time and said, the secret of keeping devotees enthused is to always give them fresh challenges. And so, certainly myself, and certainly Tamal Krishna Goswami, always needed a fresh challenge to be enthusiastic. And so, he was at a point in his life where he and of course, as you know, he was a person who meticulously planned what he was going to do. He was not in a bureaucratic way, but in a creative, powerful way. He was extremely systematic. And so therefore, he really wanted to work out exactly what he was going to do, why he was going to do it, and how he was going to do it. And just at that time, I think he actually came to spend time with me, came to stay with me in Beverly Hills. And at that time, first Beverly Hills. First Beverly Hills, and we spent about 3 days together then. At that time, I was 95. I was just in the home stretch for my own PhD at Harvard, and I happened back in Beverly Hills, and I just implored him. I just pulled out, my full arsenal of arguments and persuasive tools. I tried to convince him to take up this academic program. And he was, of course, thinking about China, and I made the argument that, with all these credentials, you can actually preach much more effectively in China or any other country in the world. He was intrigued by it. He really saw light. He saw that there was something about this, and he became intrigued by it, so much so that he actually had his mother bring over a cardboard box with all his old papers. And together, we were just sitting on the floor together, going through all these piles of papers, looking for his college transcripts. And I guess I never really told these stories very much. Anyway, so finally we found his college transcripts, and I was saying, I'm sure you can get credit for this and credit for that, and we were sort of just planning together. And so at this point, he was seriously interested. He was seriously interested in doing this. But he said that because of the respect he had for people who worked under him and who had done so much for him and with him, that he owed it to them to discuss it with them. So he personally was inclined to do it, but he had to talk to his lieutenant. So he went back to, I think it was Dallas probably. Anyway, to make a long story short, I got a little email from him a couple days later saying that, he said the big fish jumped overboard, jumped off the boat. He would joke me like that because he would always say that you want to get me into your academic program. You want to get the big fish. So he wrote me this letter and said the big fish just jumped overboard. And then he explained that the devotees he spoke to had urged him not to do this program, urged him that he should just go preach in China. That's what he really should do, and not do the academic program. So when I read that letter, I felt serene. Somehow or other, Krishna filled my heart with this peaceful confidence. And I wrote back to him and I said that I said that you are surrendered to Krishna. So if Krishna wants you to do this program, then you will do it. And I'm satisfied to know that. Because I suspected Krishna didn't want to do it. So I wrote him back that letter. And then, I guess a month or two later, I had gone to Santa Barbara to take a break from Harvard. And it was in Santa Barbara there that I worked on that OOP, our original position, that book, OOP. So I got a phone call from Tamal Krishna Goswami. I can't remember the details, whether it was first from the secretary or from him. And basically what he sort of revealed to me was that he was really, really worn out, very tired, and just tired and and worn out. He really wanted a break. Somehow Krishna, in his heart, Krishna was pushing him to take a break, and he thought of me and thought maybe he might come and spend some time with me. He knew I was in Santa Barbara, and he asked if there was facility there for him. So I thought this is a chance of a lifetime. Have Tamal Krishna Goswami come and stay with me. So I was in a 4-bedroom house, and one wing was 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and then living room, kitchen, and dining room, and then a garage which had been converted into a family room. So what I did was I took all the other devotees staying in all the rooms and just put them in the family room, and I told TKG that, yeah, we have 2 rooms for you, a bedroom and an office, because I knew that I had to seize the moment, and that I knew that a person of his caliber and of his rank would not want to spend much time there unless he had proper facility. Anyway, so he decided to come, and that was a sort of a uniquely wonderful time we spent together. He would always tell me afterwards it was one of the happiest times of his life. If you know Santa Barbara, it's certainly one of the most beautiful cities certainly in North America. It's on the coast, right on the ocean, and then has a very long ocean front. In other words, the city goes for miles along the ocean, and then just behind the city are these beautiful mountains. So the city is really between these mountains and the ocean. And Tamal Krishna Goswami, of course, had helped to found the movement in Southern California, had joined the movement on the West Coast and in Northern California. And so there was something, I think there was something which was especially just pleasant for him to be in this extraordinarily beautiful place. I had a nice house which was at close to the mountains with beautiful, spectacular mountain views from our house and yard and so on. There were ocean breezes, and to be back in the West Coast in a very beautiful place, very peaceful, and of course my disciples that were there in the house with us were extremely eager to serve him. And coming back to the West Coast where he had begun his Krishna consciousness under such pleasant circumstances, it was very pleasing to him. And because I know sometimes I jokingly refer to myself as the lifestyle acharya, because I am from Southern California, and it shows from time to time in my demeanor or lifestyle choices. But anyway, welcome impression accomplished. So I think somehow or other the whole atmosphere he had there was exactly the tonic that he was looking for, because it was a very beautiful area with perfect weather, and it was a very relaxed atmosphere, and of course we did everything within our power to make him comfortable there, and he loved it. He really, really loved it, and I could just see him sitting outside on the lawn chair or whatever. We, of course, got a better chair. Sitting outside, dictating answers to his mail. And I remember one time we drove over the mountains. Come on in.
Move up a little.
Move up just until my chair starts to tip back, and then don't move up any further. So anyway, one time we drove over the mountains, over the high mountains, and down the other side into the, I guess it's called the Santa Ynez Valley. There's a beautiful state park there, or national forest, whatever. And so we were going to go walking in the mountains, and Tamal Krishna Goswami just didn't feel like walking in the mountains that day. So I dropped him off. We had actually taken a lawn chair in the trunk of my car, and he brought, a big hat, and all his dictating equipment, because he was at that point he was way behind his letters. He had a whole bunch of letters to catch up on. And so we found a spot that he liked, and I dropped him off right at the bank of this river. If you know California, it's even though the summer was not at all like there were no bugs or flies, and it was just sort of dry. And so we set up his lawn chair right at the bank of this river, right at the foot of these steep mountains in this canyon, and he just he wanted, Tamal Krishna Goswami is self-reliant. Is not the word for him. And so we just left him there, dictating his letters. Happy as a lark, with his big hat on. And we came back about 2 hours later, and I remember he was in ecstasy, because I think it had been, I don't know. I mean, I think the way he described it, I don't know if he had ever, since he joined the movement, just ever really relaxed the way he was relaxing there. And everything about it was just pleasing. It was very visually beautiful. The weather was beautiful. And he was surrounded by people who were dedicated to serving him. And he was, it was just actually, I remember he was just so happy. That he was, as if he had, it had been who knows how long since he ever been able to relax like that and just be happy in those circumstances. So anyway, he was actually a great older brother. There's that famous story he always used to tell, how he used to always criticize me for eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I gave the argument that it was completely Vedic, because the bread was the chapati, the peanut butter was the dal, and the jelly was the chutney. And so he found that argument so interesting that night he actually came and served me my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And so a similar thing, that was of course in 1980.
I told that story.
Yeah. But then, in 1995, when we were in Santa Barbara together, I'm a little energetic by nature, so I have the habit of pacing back and forth when I chant my Gayatri mantra. And so, Tamal Krishna Goswami said to me, "You can't do that. You can't walk while you're chanting your Gayatri mantra." Anyway, make a long story short, within a few days, he was also walking. So it was a great experience, because Tamal and I, we had our own wing of the house. I had a bedroom and an office. He had a bedroom and an office, and we had our own wing like that, and it was just a wonderful thing. So at that point, a few days, he really wanted to have serious talks with me about his future. He was trying to decide between China and the academic program. So, and I was saying, well, Krishna, if Krishna wants you to do it, he's certainly going to show you. So just almost like within hours after I said that, he got a call from China, and the government was cracking down, and they said, you can't come to China, forget China for now. So I wouldn't say that I gloated. But I was kind of like punching the air. And then he was joking out. Also, Tamal was joking a lot about, well, you got me. So then it was the academic program. So then anyway, we had been discussing so much. Then he decided, okay, so it's going to be the academic program. Then we proceeded to practicalities, like which school. So we talked about different schools. We discussed all the, basically all the real possibilities in America, possibilities in Europe, what kind of studies he wanted to do, what schools had those studies. And after discussing for a while, he insisted that he really wanted to be in Texas because that's where he had his family, spiritual family, and he felt comfortable there. So then we just focused on Texas schools. And we considered the University of Texas at Austin, Rice University, and I don't think we considered Texas Christian or Texas Agriculture and Mining. I think we did talk briefly about the University of Houston, but I was kind of pushing for Austin just because I always thought it'd be a great thing to open up Austin. I thought that if Tamal Krishna Goswami's there, everything will be done there. But then when we investigated the curriculum, it turned out they didn't really have the program he wanted. And as we talked about it, we had real serious talks where I was kind of like his academic counselor, I guess you could say, and I was asking him all kinds of questions, interviewing him, and trying to understand what kind of program he would be comfortable with. And it turned out that because in the study of Vedic culture academically, there's really two approaches. One approach is just the study of religion, which is ultimately where he ended up. And the other approach is more linguistic, historical, not focusing explicitly on religion, just like the culture itself, historical, linguistic perspective. And he decided that wasn't really something that wasn't as comfortable for him as the religious studies side. And so it turned out that the University of Texas at Austin didn't really have that kind of approach. And also wasn't very strong in Hinduism, more Buddhism and other things. So, and then Rice University also we decided was limited in their curriculum. So Southern Methodist University, Tamal Krishna Goswami had different disciples going, and perhaps it was Anajai, but he went to Southern Methodist, and the response was very good. And so then we decided, and we were getting in the mail by FedEx or Express Mail, different college catalogs and all kinds of things, and we were exploring. And so there were several days when we were just focused full time on evaluating different colleges. And then finally it was decided that he would go to Southern Methodist University. So anyway, we spent 5 weeks together there in Santa Barbara. So all of Tamal Krishna Goswami's unique and outstanding superlative achievements at SMU, all of you probably know as well or better than me. Although we did keep closely in touch about that. And I even came and visited, and I heard about this whole cast of characters, the faculty at SMU, the different teachers, because Goswami was, he had a very strong artistic side also. I mean, he was a musician. He wrote that brilliant Jagannath, which I think is, I think ISKCON has not even begun to understand how important that work is, I mean, historically. But anyway, he wrote that Jagannath, and of course the Prabhupada Lila. And so, with all that artistic side of him, he would paint these verbal portraits of all of the different faculty. And it was so when I finally got to meet them, I felt it was like, like reading the book, now you get to see the movie. So anyway, of course, he had unique achievements at Southern Methodist University, and then he went to Cambridge, and again, left us keep using these big words like superlative, monumental, outstanding, but the words really apply. His Tamal Krishna, from a historical point of view, because I've studied the history of religions, and so you get a feel for what kinds of things that we're doing now will be very important to history. And writing the first systematic study of Srila Prabhupada's teachings, that was called systematic theology, is so important because it actually presents Prabhupada in a way that he'll be taken seriously by the people that Prabhupada most wanted to take him seriously. Okay, that's a good way to put it. If you listen to Prabhupada's lectures, he's always talking about the scientists, the philosophers. So people like scientists and philosophers were very much on Prabhupada's mind. Prabhupada, of course, Prabhupada said, we have the mass, we want the class. In a sense, we're getting the class again. I mean, in once, because this is sort of getting filtered, and in so many ways, Krishna's filtering out some people. So I guess some people's destiny was to become Vaishnava milk paper. Prabhupada said boiling the milk. I don't mean people that are living outside temples or have jobs, I mean people that betray Prabhupada and that they're chastity to Prabhupada, not people that just live outside temples. In any case, which is not a betrayal of Prabhupada since he himself lived outside the temple when he was a householder. So in a sense, what ISKCON is left with now is the class. And now we have to get more class. That's another topic for another day. But Prabhupada, the reason I brought this topic is because when we joined the movement, we were young, we thought, well, we're it. We're the Hare Krishna movement. But Prabhupada really wanted to attract the intellectual and political and economic leaders of the world because he wanted to make the world Krishna conscious. He wanted to get a handle on the world. So Prabhupada was extremely concerned. He was constantly and profoundly concerned about the intellectual leaders, the philosophers, the scientists, and this dissertation, Tamal Krishna Goswami's presentation of Prabhupada's teachings as systematic theology, is to present Prabhupada in a way that is intelligible, is understandable, is interesting to the people that Prabhupada most wanted to attract. So again, in historical terms, I mean, we have buildings here, temples that he developed, and there's devotees, but let's say 1,000 years from now, I mean, things like his dissertation are going to be famous documents. I mean, it won't take 1,000 years to become famous. That's not what I mean. But they're documents of great historical importance, so that Vaishnavas and just even non-devotees, scholars, philosophers, historians, for thousands of years will study these books. So it's quite important. It's a very important contribution. And so, if you study Tamal Krishna Goswami's life, it's just a series of breakthroughs, a series of unique discoveries, and pioneering work, doing, going where other people couldn't go, doing what others couldn't do, and not in a trivial way, but in very important areas, helping to establish the movement in 3 continents. It happens to be the 3 most important continents in the world. Creating practically a traveling Sankirtan, perfecting it with Radha Damodar, opening the most populous country in the world, being the first disciple of Prabhupada to present his teaching systematically to the intellectual people of the world, and so on and so forth. So, my own realization, which I tried to express in a few words I sent by email, my own realization is that as shocking as these incidents have been, it's just sort of, there's something very normal about it, not a physical part of changing one's body, but what was really happening. In other words, we should, I'm sure you all are seeing these things spiritually, and after all, Tamal Krishna Goswami, in his relationship with all of you, all he was ever trying to do was to get you to see things spiritually, to be Krishna conscious. So, certainly, there's no other appropriate response to these events than to do what he was always trying to get you to do, and that is be Krishna conscious. And so there's, in that sense, from an ultimate spiritual perspective, there's something very normal about this, in the sense that, without a doubt, Tamal Krishna Goswami has just gone on to pioneer something even much bigger than before. And Prabhupada, if you study his relation with Prabhupada, it was a series of calls, Prabhupada calling Tamal Krishna Goswami to do things that no one else could do. And I have absolutely no doubt that that's exactly what's going on now. He's again been called upon to do something that no one else could do. So, also, as the first great disciple of Prabhupada that I really knew well, that has gone on to bigger and better things, it actually has, in an important way, increased my Krishna consciousness, because when you've seen an older brother do something, you think, maybe I could do that. In the sense that it becomes more real that, yes, we go on and we serve Krishna eternally, and Prabhupada will call us to go on to other things. So the whole philosophy, the whole reality of our condition in this world and where we're going has become more real to me. And not real, and not in a sad sense, but in an inspiring sense. Because somehow I can see in the life of Tamal Krishna Goswami someone who lived wonderfully in this world and then has gone on, because it's somehow so real for me. It's so obvious to me that he's gone on to serve Prabhupada in even more extraordinary ways. To me, that's so plain to see that Krishna consciousness has just become even more real to me simply by seeing his life. And also, when someone completes a particular, what Prabhupada called a chapter of their life, because we're all eternal and we all go through many lives, but when someone completes a particular chapter perfectly, in the sense of never deviating from the lotus feet of their spiritual master, never giving up devotional service, always trying to do what's best for Prabhupada's mission, then there can be no doubt about someone's spiritual position. I know that even though I did a lot of the purports, or most of the purports for the Bhagavatam after Prabhupada left, I was actually informed that they took my name off it because they thought it was afraid I might bloop. And if I did bloop, people wouldn't want to read the books, they didn't want to have to bother getting them translated again. Which is understandable. So, anyway. mad world. But the point is that people do have doubts sometimes. Well, this person now is in a high position, but Krishna has proved that Tamal Krishna Goswami was actually an exalted Vaishnava, was a very advanced, and obviously eternal servant of Srila Prabhupada. Makes me that's just obvious. And so now there can't be any further doubt about it. It's the jury is back in, and it's all clear that he surrendered to Prabhupada. He gave his entire adult life to Srila Prabhupada. He accomplished extraordinary achievements that no one else could do at Prabhupada's feet, and he completed this particular chapter, many chapters of service, perfectly with demonstrating to the world his actual position. So meanwhile, back on the ranch, we're still stuck down here. And he's, again, out in front of us. He's above us and in front of us, like he always was. So, we just have to do the best we can. And there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do, and I'm sure there was nothing else he wanted for us but to try to do it. Prabhupada's work. So, I guess I'll finish there. Are there any questions or about this or anything you'd like to clarify? Yes.
I just want to remember one thing that in 1980, I'm sure the radio went to China. You came to Houston, and I remember that was the first time I met you. And I thought it was really nice that Sri Rudy called you and asked you to come to Houston and check on all the roads and stuff.
Oh.
That's because it was such a radical situation. It all just got initiated, maybe like a two-year-old devotees. And then all of a sudden the GBC said, okay, you're out of here. And that's it. So he had to go to China. And he couldn't stay in the United States, actually. They gave him an order. So you came and checked on everything. And I feel like that's what's going on again. He's been called, and here you are again. That's what I want to say.
Right. Thank you very much. Yes, he has been called. And we can't be selfish, because obviously Prabhupada needs him for something. We need him, but Prabhupada needs him, so guess who wins? Yes.
Is there something about great personalities that when they do extraordinary things, some people are jealous of that, or they don't accept it?
God, they sure are.
Like Prabhupada,
This is the world of jealousy. When they're jealous of Krishna, yes, of course. Yes, because to be jealous of a great soul means that instead of looking at the person as Prabhupada sees them, you're separating yourself. That person separates himself from Prabhupada and looks at that great soul differently. We know how grateful Prabhupada was for all the service that Tamal Krishna Goswami did. He had a unique relationship with Prabhupada. When Prabhupada was preparing to leave this world, of course Tamal Krishna Goswami was there. And I don't think it's improper to say, like Ishwar Puri was there from Madhavendra Puri. Of course, all of us, I think, I don't want to say we're on the platform of Ishwar Puri and Madhavendra, but still, there's an analogy there. There is an analogy. There is something similar. It is following the footsteps. So, nothing could be more clear than Tamal Krishna Goswami's special relationship with Prabhupada. So no one who claims to be a follower of Prabhupada has a right to see Tamal Krishna Goswami any other way than as Prabhupada saw him. as his right-hand man, and was an extraordinarily dedicated and confident, and successful servant. But I mean, if Tamal Krishna Goswami gets criticized, he's in good company, Krishna and Lord Chaitanya, Ramchandra, President of the United States. So, Prabhupada said that the injunction, thou shalt not kill, means, someone's killing. Because no one's inclined to kill, why say thou shalt not kill? And we don't put signs up in our temples, do not eat grasshoppers. Because to the best of our knowledge, none of the Prabhus are so inclined. Yeah, I guess, I don't know, maybe some parts of the world you might have that in the ashram. So, what I want to say is, we have the injunction, famous injunction, that Acharya Mang Vijanayan, understand the Acharya to be me, Navamanyeta Karichit, and never belittle him. That's sort of what it means, never belittle him. Namartya Yasuyeta. Do not envy him thinking he's an ordinary human being. Sarvadeva Guru. So, if the injunction is there not to belittle a bona fide guru and acharya, that means someone must be inclined to do it. Otherwise, why the injunction? If people don't naturally envy an acharya, then why is there an injunction not to envy him? So, in this case, this is quintessentially a case of let the dogs bark. Any other?
We got this picture in the temple. Very, very much to copy the picture.
That's a great idea. And his picture is still in the temple room in Atlanta where I was there. It's been there, still there. Every day when I was in Atlanta, at Guru Puja, I offered flowers to Prabhupada, and I offered flowers to him. Every day, so I thought it was very enlightening. We're working on a paper now in the Guru issue that 2 words would probably, never ever in any future life want to hear juxtaposed. The Guru issue, but if you read, so we've done massive research. Some people have opinions on the Gurus. They don't bother to read, study Prabhupada's books on the subject. They don't have to because they have such extraordinary intuition. But if we actually read Prabhupada's books, we find that Vaishnava culture is an extremely generous culture. And I think I can only pity people pity those who call themselves Vaishnavas who aren't eager to glorify and honor Tamal Krishna Goswami at this point. I think they're pitiable, if not punishable, by the laws of nature. And actually, as I said in those few words I sent, I have no doubt that Tamal Krishna Goswami has accomplished one of his most cherished goals in this transition of going on to serve Prabhupada in some extraordinary way that I've given anything to know about. I mean, I have no doubt that he's doing something extraordinary, something amazing for Prabhupada. And it was such an outpouring of appreciation and honor and sympathy that Tamal Krishna Goswami, even in going on to rejoin Prabhupada somewhere, has taken a giant step toward reestablishing civilization within his culture. And so, yes, Vaishnava culture is the most generous, magnanimous, grateful culture in the world. And I think it's fair to say that no other devotee in ISKCON could have or would have evoked such a reaction. And so again, he did what no one else could do. So it's another outstanding achievement. It's just a very long list without saying. There's something particularly, what's the word, disgusting about someone who is vastly inferior daring to criticize someone who is so vastly superior. And so so though anyone who is in any way a cultured, civilized human being can only glorify Tamal Krishna Goswami. And those who are bereft of minimal human instincts, those who practically despise civilization itself, may say something negative. They despise human civilization. Yeah. But then again, if we're in good company here, because look at what people said about Krishna. An envious fool made a stupid remark about Ramchandra, about Sita. So that's the nature of the material world. It's not something which has to be worried about too much. It just proves we're in the material world and that there's no limit to how dumb you can get. Yes.
It seemed when Mother Kirtida left the planet that in her final days it started to be revealed to us how advanced she really was. And we've been around her for years, but things started to come out. And everybody here, we all love Tamal Krishna Maharaj so much, but it seems maybe the same thing will happen for the world, for the movement, that certain people that didn't think as highly of him will be changed now.
Well, it's already happened. I'm sure it's happened in many, many hearts. So that's already a fact.
Someone was telling me today that when Krishna left the planet, there was an arrangement that the non-believers would see Krishna in a certain light and be faithful to him as he was and is. I don't know. It seems that there's a correlation. She was able to draw the analogy very explicitly.
Yes, of course.
With Krishna's departure.
Yes, of course. There's some bozo in Austin that criticizes Prabhupada. Prabhupada, they criticize Krishna, Prabhupada, everything's sacred. There are people that, criticize Jesus Christ. To come into the world, when a great soul comes into this world and naturally assumes great influence and prestige because of their stature, and you do that in the material world, which is founded on the principle of envy. Don't forget that the entry ticket to even get into this world is to be envious. Prabhupada said, was asked why we come to this world, because you envy Krishna. You were thinking, why should Krishna be everything? So envy is the foundation of the whole universe. So to come into such a universe and to display spiritual opulence, leadership, extraordinary ability in a world founded on envy, and then the fact that someone gets envious is the last thing in the world that should surprise anyone. But Tamal Krishna Goswami was tough, is tough, and so we can follow his footsteps, not worry about this thing. What time is it now? Perhaps if there's no other point, perhaps we have a little kirtan. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Tamal Krishna Goswami Gurudev ki jai. Yes, of course. Krishna